My name is Ellen Vargas. I'm 76 years old, and I used to think my years of being a school principal made me too sharp to ever be taken for a fool. But grief has a way of dulling your senses in ways you don't even realize until it's too late. I live in a quiet retirement community in Sun City, Arizona, where the air is dry and the streets are lined with golf carts instead of bicycles. I lost my husband, Mateo, 5 years ago to a stroke that came as swiftly and silently as a passing cloud, and since then, the days have felt like long chapters in a book I wasn't ready to read. My children live hours away, one in Oregon, the other in Florida, and though we talk on Sundays, the silences in between those calls became fertile ground for loneliness to settle in like dust on my windowsills. So when a message popped up one evening on Facebook from someone claiming to be Gordon Brenner, an old flame I hadn't spoken to in nearly 50 years, it was like hearing a song I'd forgotten I loved. Gordon and I had dated in our 20s, before I met Mateo. He was charming, always quoting poetry and making jokes about my overprotective father, and when we broke up because of his job overseas, I remember crying for weeks. We hadn't spoken since 1971. The message was simple. Ellen? Is it really you? And I swear my heart skipped. The photo on his profile looked like him, or what I imagined he looked like now, gray hair, a strong jaw, soft eyes behind glasses. The details came flooding back as we messaged. How we used to sneak cherry sodas behind the library, the time we got caught necking in the back row of a matinee, how he used to call me Ellie Bill. And he used that name in the messages, too. We started chatting every day. He said he never married, never stopped thinking about me, even found my picture in an old box and decided to look me up. I told him about Mateo, my kids, even the arthritis in my hands. He said he was living in Portugal now, retired, and writing a book about his years as a journalist. I believed every word. There was a warmth in our messages that filled a hole I hadn't even admitted was there. Then, 2 weeks into our renewed connection, he told me he was in trouble, something about an unexpected medical bill after a fall, and complications with his overseas bank account. He was embarrassed to ask, but could I loan him $2,500 just until things cleared? I didn't hesitate. I wired it through Western Union, feeling like I was helping an old friend in need. But then, a week later, he needed more, something about customs fees for medication. Then again, something about his landlord threatening eviction. The amounts grew, $1,000 here, $3,000 there. By the end of the month, I'd sent him just over $12,000. Every time I questioned it, he'd tell me how much he regretted letting me go all those years ago. He'd send photos of sunsets over the Lisbon coast, telling me how he wished I were there with him, how we'd walk the shore hand in hand like the young fools we were. I believed it because I wanted to believe it. One day, I mentioned him to my daughter, Lisa, during our weekly call. I didn't mean to, it just slipped out. She asked who Gordon was, and when I told her, there was a long silence. Then she got sharp, asking if I'd sent him anything. I lied at first, said no. But the guilt ate at me, and I confessed the next day. Lisa went into full panic mode, called the bank, called a friend who worked in cybercrime, and begged me to stop contacting him until we could figure out what was going on. She was the one who found out Gordon had died in 2015. His obituary was in a local Michigan paper. The man I'd been messaging was someone else, someone who used Gordon's photo, knew just enough from my social media to impersonate him, and played my heart like a fiddle tuned to sorrow. I felt sick, ashamed, betrayed. I didn't even know who to be angry at, him or myself. But Lisa, bless her, wouldn't let me disappear into embarrassment. She encouraged me to talk to a detective in the local sheriff's department, who connected me with a task force that tracks these kinds of romance scams. Turns out, I wasn't the first, and I wouldn't be the last. They traced the messages to a ring operating out of Ghana. They were using stolen identities, often of dead Americans, to lure widows and retirees into emotional traps. I didn't get my money back, not yet, anyway, but I gave them everything. Screenshots, emails, wire transfer details. My testimony helped them shut down one of the smaller pipelines those scammers were using, and it made the local news. A reporter interviewed me, blurred my face, changed my name, but told my story. And after it aired, 3 other women in my retirement community came forward with similar stories. We started meeting once a week for coffee, sharing our stories, our grief, our foolishness. We called ourselves the Love Fools. That name made us laugh. And slowly, I stopped feeling so alone. I may have lost money, but I gained something deeper, awareness, connection, and the strength to speak up. So maybe someone else's Ellie Bell won't fall for a voice in the dark that isn't who it says it is. It's a strange thing, rebuilding your sense of self after it's been cracked, not broken, not shattered, but cracked in a place no one else can see. After I found out the truth about Gordon, I spent weeks waking up with a pit in my stomach, wondering how someone like me, a woman who used to discipline entire classrooms of unruly high schoolers and manage tight school budgets without losing a cent, could be so thoroughly duped. I kept replaying the messages in my head, his soft, Ellie Bell greetings, the photos of sunsets, the way he remembered details I thought no one could possibly know. It was Lisa who finally pieced it together. She found out that an old photo album I posted on Facebook 5 years ago, full of black and whites from the 60s, had been public. That's where they got the name Gordon. That's where they saw him with his arm around me at our college graduation. It wasn't psychic. It was social media and heartbreak combined. And I'd fed the scammers the rest without even knowing it. Casual mentions of Mateo, of being alone, of the arthritis that kept me from typing too fast. I was their ideal target. But once I stepped out of that initial fog of shame, I felt something shift inside me, something harden, like old concrete finally setting. I wasn't going to stay silent. I'd already talked to the sheriff's office, but now I went further. With Lisa's help, I agreed to speak at a fraud awareness seminar held by the local police at our community center. At first, just standing at that podium made my mouth go dry. My hands trembled. But I told the truth. I told every painful, ridiculous, humiliating part. And when I was done, a woman in the front row, Martha Henderson, who I knew only vaguely from HOA meetings, walked right up to me and whispered, "I think it happened to me, too." That moment felt like a door swinging open. Martha's story wasn't identical, but it echoed in the same painful register. A man claiming to be an old neighbor from New York, a shared history that turned into daily messages, then requests for gift cards for his niece's schoolbooks. After we spoke, others came forward. A man named Richard in the condo down the street, who'd wired $5,000 to a woman claiming to be a long-lost cousin stranded in Brazil. A soft-spoken widow named Beverly, who nearly mortgaged her home for a scammer posing as a retired admiral. The realization hit hard. This wasn't just my mistake. It was a wave, sweeping quietly through my community, targeting the lonely, the nostalgic, the proud. So we formed something more than coffee and sympathy. We created a formal group. Stars, seniors taking action, reporting scams. Lisa designed a logo, and Martha had connections at the local paper who agreed to run a column featuring our stories, anonymized if needed. I wrote the first one myself, pouring out the details of Mike Gordon scam with raw honesty, and signed it. A heart too trusting, but wiser now. The letters we got afterward shocked me. Not just from our town, but from Phoenix, Tucson, even people in Nevada and California. Stories of lost pensions, fake inheritances, crypto nonsense, and tears shed over people who never existed. I felt my voice growing stronger, steadier. We started holding monthly meetings, inviting local law enforcement, even a cybersecurity expert from the state attorney general's office. Each session drew more people, and after the third one, I was approached by a young woman named Teresa Jimenez, who worked for a public radio station in Flagstaff. She asked if she could interview me for a piece on elder scams. I said yes, this time with my real name, my real face. It aired 2 weeks later, and that's when things took another unexpected turn. I received a letter in the mail from a woman named Joa Minsa in Toronto. She said she had heard the interview and recognized the scam as nearly identical to what her father had endured before he passed, a scam she believed was being run by the same group. But she also said something else. She had access to records, evidence collected by a nonprofit she worked with that investigated cross-border fraud networks. She believed, with my help, we could submit a formal complaint to the RCMP, adding weight to their ongoing investigation. At first, I hesitated, me, involved in something international? But Ajoa wasn't asking for money. She was asking for my story, my timeline, the records I'd kept, screenshots, receipts, anything. Lisa helped me pull it all together. We scanned everything and sent it off. 2 months later, Ajoa called to say that our combined efforts had led to an official warrant being issued for one of the suspected scam ringleaders. It wasn't the man who messaged me, those people use fake names like water, but it was someone who'd facilitated dozens of wire transfers across borders. That news felt like a deep, cleansing breath after months of holding it in. I still hadn't recovered the money, I may never, but I'd helped someone face justice. That was more than I ever expected. Around the same time, I got a letter in the mail from a man named Frank Olson. He said he'd read my story in the Arizona Republic and felt like I'd written his pain down better than he ever could. He asked, politely, if I'd be willing to get coffee. I almost said no. After everything, how could I trust anyone again? But something in his letter was different. He wasn't smooth, or poetic, or trying too hard. He was just honest. So I said yes. And over cinnamon rolls at a diner just off Bell Road, Frank told me about how he'd been scammed out of $20,000 by a woman who claimed to be a retired nurse with cancer. We talked for 3 hours. Then we did it again the next week. And the next. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was something real, and gentle, and rooted in truth, which, at our age, is as rare as it is precious. What I learned through all this wasn't just about scams or criminals or how easy it is to fall for something when your heart is aching. I learned that silence is their weapon. Shame is their accomplice. But stories, our stories, are the antidote. And I plan to keep telling mine, as long as someone was willing to listen. The hardest part about being scammed isn't just the money, it's the way it lingers, how it makes you doubt your own mind. After Gordon, I second-guessed every message, every phone call, even friendly faces. That trust one once carried so easily had vanished like smoke. But healing, I've found, isn't forgetting. It's finding a way to carry the memory without letting it crush you. And the months after my story aired, things changed quickly. I started speaking at more events, libraries, churches, even a retirement conference in Sedona. Every time I stood up, shared what had happened, I saw the same thing in the audience. Heads nodding, tears blinking back, people realizing they weren't alone. That's how stars grew. Our little support group turned into a movement. Seniors taking action, reporting scams. We got a small grant and launched a website called Voices Against the Silence, where we posted our stories and warning signs. The responses were overwhelming. Letters from Arizona, Michigan, even Canada, people sharing how they'd been fooled, and how reading our stories helped them stop before it was too late. One day, I got a call from a national morning show. They'd read about stars and wanted me to share my story. I nearly said no, but Lisa insisted. Think about the people you'll help, she said. So I flew to New York, nervous as anything, and sat under those bright studio lights. I told my story clearly, calmly, and ended with this. You are not stupid. You are not broken. You are not to blame. The emails that poured in after that. It was like opening the floodgate of voices long silenced by shame. People weren't just thanking me. They were coming forward. We even held a statewide stars conference that fall with hundreds in attendance, from veterans to church leaders to widowed retirees who had once been too afraid to speak. Back home, life settled into a new rhythm. I walked most mornings with Frank. Yes, that Frank, the kind, quiet man I'd met after the first newspaper story. He never pushed, never rushed anything. He'd been scammed too, by someone pretending to be a nurse with cancer. We found something honest in each other, something we didn't expect but quietly needed. One morning, as we walked past a blooming jacaranda, he said, maybe that scammer didn't know it, but he woke something up in you the rest of us needed. It took me a moment to understand, but he was right. My voice had become something bigger than my pain. Then came a letter from Carol in Michigan. She was about to send money to a man claiming to be her old nursing school crush, but she'd read my story online and stopped. You saved me, she wrote. That letter sat on my kitchen table for days, and every time I looked at it, I felt a tear well, not of shame this time, but of pride. Because I knew now that my mistake hadn't defined me. It had become a warning light for someone else. So if you're watching this, and you think it's too late, too embarrassing, or too painful to speak out, know this, your story has power. You are not alone. And sometimes, sharing your truth can stop a lie from spreading any further.